to Excel Tips. My name is Neale Blackwood, and in this episode we're going to look at some of the new functions and calculation methods that have been introduced into Excel over the last 3 or so years. We'll start off with probably the biggest change to Excel's calculation engine for decades. It's called dynamic arrays. Now, I did cover this in detail in 3 separate articles back in 2020, which is when they were introduced. You need the subscription version of Excel to sort of access a lot of the information we're going to cover today. So the way to think about dynamic arrays is where we used to work with individual cells in Excel, you can now work with ranges. So as a demonstration, so let's say we wanted to link to like a range here. What we would do is we would click on the cell, and then we would sort of drag that down and then drag it across. So we're linking to that range. Dynamic arrays allow you to create one single formula that does the same thing. So if I go equals, and let's say I click on there and select that. Now that's normally what you do with a function that's accepting a range, but now you can enter the range by itself. And when you do, when I hit enter, it creates what's called a spill range. You can see that blue outline around the range. So that's telling you that it's a spill range. A spill range only has one formula. It's in the top left cell of the spill range. You can see that that formula looks normal. It's black. But when I click another cell, you'll see that that changes to a grayed out formula. There is only one formula in this range. So that's a totally new way of calculating in Excel. And if I put a value over here somewhere, then that will cause a spill error. So a spill error means Excel wants to spill a range, but there's something in the way. So the range around the spill formula has to be clear for the spill to happen. So if I delete it, it'll all come back. You can refer to a spill range. So if you refer to the top left cell of the spill range and use the hash symbol, so that's above the number 3 on your keyboard. When I hit enter, you'll notice that as soon as I pressed it, it's highlighted that whole spill range. That links directly to that spill range, and it creates its own spill range. So if I extend this one, so if let's say I go across to J now, that this one, which is linked to it, will also spill to match it. So that is a really powerful calculation technique in Excel now. It's going to change the way we do budgets, forecasts, reports, all of that sort of stuff. You can now do a lot more with dynamic arrays. And there's some other functions that we'll see later that are associated with it that make dynamic arrays really powerful. Released at the same time was XLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP was one of Excel's most popular functions with accountants, and it's been replaced. It's now the XLOOKUP. So XLOOKUP allows you to look up a code, but it doesn't matter where the code is. Now in VLOOKUP, the code had to be in the left column, but in this case, the code is in the middle of the table, but that doesn't stop XLOOKUP. So XLOOKUP, you look up a code, you tell it the range you want to look up, which is column D, and then the range you want to return, which is column A in this case. The fourth argument, if you can't find it, it'll return, in this case, a blank cell. So XLOOKUP also handles errors, so you can avoid the error. Because I've actually copied this down to the other cells, and you'll notice there's no NA error, even though this cell is blank. If I take that out, then you do get the good old NA error. XLOOKUP has its own error handling built into it. And this has been copied across. So that's XLOOKUP. Okay, let's say we want to provide a rating for the price. So if the price is, let's say, above 25, it's going to be a high price. If it's below 15, it's going to be a low price. And in between, it's going to be a medium price. Now, we're going to use the XLOOKUP to extract the price, but we're going to need to use a number of XLOOKUPs to get that figured out. There is a new function called the let function, LET, and it lets you use variables within your formula. So what we can do is we could capture the result of the XLOOKUP and then use that in another formula within the let function. So let's first calculate the price. So type equals XL, so then you can hit the tab key and to get XLOOKUP, and we're going to look up that code there, comma, and we're going to look it up in column D, comma, and then return the price, which is in column E, comma, and then a 0 on the end, so that's the error handler. And there we go. So that's the 15 for ABC 125. We need to capture that, so let's go in here and go let X, comma. Now what that does is the X is gonna grab that 15 basically, comma. So now we can use the X in a formula. If X is greater than, let's say, 25, then we'll call that high, comma. If X is less than, let's say, 15, we'll call that low, and whatever's left we'll call medium. So that closes the bracket on the if. We'll close the bracket, oh, that's the if. Oh, that's right, there's two ifs. And one more to close the bracket on the let. There we go. Always check your colored brackets because they do match. So we had two if functions there. The first if function had a red bracket, so that's the red bracket on the end, and then the last bracket should always be black when you're creating an Excel function. That's it. So that's a medium price, so 15, because I said below 15, and because this is it is 15. So if we try another one, so let's try ABC 126, that should be low. That's good. And if we try that very first one, that should be high. There we go. So the let function allows you to capture a value, in this case the result of the XLOOKUP, which you can then use that variable in another formula to refer to that value. We would have had to have used two XLOOKUPs in that example, but we only need to do it once and then just use that variable to refer to it. I have covered the let function in detail in an earlier article, so you can check that out as well, because there's a companion video there as well. Okay, so that's XLOOKUP and let. Let's have a look at text and lambda. Okay, so the text is, there's three new text functions. So there's a TEXTBEFORE. So what this is doing, so this is the cell function returns the file name, which includes the whole path, the file name, which is enclosed in the square brackets, and the sheet name on the end. You can use the TEXTBEFORE to grab the path. So that's before the opening square bracket, the left square bracket. We can use TEXTAFTER to grab the text after the right or the last square bracket, and that gives us the sheet name. We can use them together, so to grab the file name, which is in the middle between the square brackets, we can use the TEXTBEFORE and the TEXTAFTER in combination to extract out the middle there, the file name. And there is another text function called TEXTSPLIT. So in this case, I'm splitting it by the, I always get confused between the / and the backslash, but that's using that to split that text string. So it's splitting it to D, A4, CPA in the black, and then everything after that, which is the file name with the sheet name. So TEXTSPLIT, and you'll notice that that creates a spill range. It's spilling across in that case. The LAMBDA function is another new function, and this one is really, really powerful. LAMBDA allows you to create your own custom functions, which again, I've covered in a recent article. So you can check out the LAMBDA function in more detail on the Neale Blackwood website. I thought I'd quickly take you through a LAMBDA that will return the file name. The file name up here had two functions together, the TEXTBEFORE and the TEXTAFTER. We could create a single function that returns the file name, and it can be standalone. So that's what this LAMBDA will allow us to do. Now, Lambda has a weird syntax on the end. You need an extra set of brackets on the end as the input to the Lambda. Now, there is no input to this Lambda because we're returning the file name, so we don't need to provide it with an input. It's like the today function, which just returns today's date. This is going to return the file name of this file. Okay, so I've used the cell function within this because it's a standalone function. So this custom function, when we create it, can be used anywhere. To create the custom function, you copy the Lambda without the extra set of brackets on the end. Copy that. So now I'm going to go to formulas, define a name. Now I always use a FN, lowercase prefix for my custom functions. This, because there's so many new functions in Excel, this differentiates it from the other functions in Excel. And I'll call this file name. There we go. And all I need to do is drop the formula into that refers to section. You can put a comment here to describe it as well. I'm not going to do that now, but we click OK. And so now I have a custom function called fn file name that will return the file name in any sheet, basically. So pick a sheet. Let's go down the end here. Equals fn file name. And there we go. So there's the file name returned, and that's a custom function. And again, I've covered the custom functions in a separate article, so you can jump on the Neale Blackwood website and see the article. It's got a companion video and examples as well. Okay, BYROW and BYCOL. So these two functions allow you basically to split up a spill range by rows or by columns. One of the problems when dynamic arrays were first introduced is that you couldn't easily add up a column within a two-dimensional range or a row. Now you can using BYROW and BYCOL. So the formulas are already here. So this is a spill range. So this is using the SUMIFS. This is extracting all of the gadget sales for January 23, and that single formula is populating this whole range. It's a SUMIFS, so it's doing a multi-criteria sum based on, which I've also covered. SUMIFS is not a new function, but I've covered that in a previous In the Black article, so again you can check that out. Basically, it's grabbing the name and it's using a spill range because there's a couple of spill ranges here as well. That's all of the unique, so that's a new function. Months, so that's all the months listed. And this is all the unique product names listed. Okay, so that there is a spill range. And in the old days, when dynamic arrays were first introduced, it's really hard to add up that row in the spill range or that column. And so they introduced the BYROW, and you refer to that spill range. You have to use a lambda. The lambda accepts a variable. We didn't use the variable in the previous lambda example. Basically, what happens is the BYROW gives the lambda the row of the spill range, and then we can just sum it, which is using the x variable again. And that will all automatically spill down as well, so that spills down. And the same by col, so we can add up the column, again, that same spill range reference, pretty much the same formula basically, just adding that up. And then this is adding up that spill range, and we can check it by adding up the total spill range as well. So C2 hash is that whole range, so we've got a couple of checks there to make sure that everything is being added up as it should. Here's a brand new function that I haven't covered, but I'm going to cover now. It's the image function. So I've got a couple of images on my website that I want to bring in to this sheet. At the moment, you can only bring in images from the web, so you need a HTTP address to bring it in. I believe this is being improved in an update that's coming soon that will allow you to extract images from your own servers and your own hard drive. But at the moment, it's only on extracting an image off the web. So I'll blur out my address here, but this is on my website, and I'm going to bring in the image there. So it's just called image, and click on the reference to the where the image is. This is a PNG. You can also import JPEGs. And there it is. That's as simple as it is. I can copy that down. I've got another image here just of the escape key. And again, you need, well, obviously you need access to the internet to be able to bring that in. But my understanding is that they are improving this so that you'll be able to bring in some images off your own hard drive or your own servers, which would be a lot better. Okay, another brand new function is VSTACK, so it stands for vertical stack. If we've got two lists and we want to combine them into a single list, that is now really, really easy with VSTACK. So you select one list, comma, and the other list, and it's as simple as that, and it just stacks them, creating a spill range to do that. So again, you can refer to that spill range by using the hash symbol, and so once you've got it, you can then refer to it really, really easily for things like drop downs, that sort of thing. So that's VSTACK, and there's also a HSTACK. So this is a horizontal stack, so this is going sideways, if you like. So if I wanted to combine these two lists, I can use the HSTACK. And again, it's as easy as selecting one and then selecting the other. And that creates, again, another spill range, which again, you can refer to somewhere else, just using the hash symbol. And so that's HSTACK. So that's a horizontal stack, and VSTACK is a vertical stack. Okay, another new function. This one is called take. So the idea is that take takes entries or rows out of a spill range. So what I've got here is on the left hand side, I've got a table of sales and customers. It's sorted by customer name. What I want to do is sort it by the value. And so what I've got here is a sort function. So here's another new function called sort that is part of dynamic arrays, and it's sorting the columns on the left hand side by column 2, which is the sales value, and when you use -1 on the end, it is telling it to do a descending sort. So it's sorting the sales in descending order. So the list here is sales sorted by, or is the customers sorted by sales in descending order. Now that's where I want to summarize. So I want to grab for example, I could grab the first 4 by using a for here. So take, again, you refer to the spill range, and then you tell it how many rows to take out of it. So when you use a for, you're telling it to grab the top 4. If you change it to 10, it's going to grab 10. And if you put a minus in, it takes it from the end. So if I go -10, this is going to be the lowest sales, but they are still descending order. So that's the lowest sales there. -10 grabs it from the bottom, +10 grabs it from the top. So you're taking out of a spill range. Oh, it doesn't have to be a spill range too. It can just be a normal range. Spill range is the most common use of it, but you can just refer to a range and grab the top 10 items out of that. And drop is sort of the opposite to some extent. It's like cutting off so many. So if I say, again, we've got the same example here, and it's the same formula basically. It's just drop. You have the formula, and then you can do rows, or you can do columns. I should have mentioned you can do this by rows or columns. Rows is probably the common way to do it. You can do columns. So columns is optional. That's the third argument there. Okay, so this is saying, I'll do 95. So this is saying drop the top 95 items. So that leaves that same entries down the bottom, if you like. So we're seeing the last 10 or so entries there. If I use minus, then again, I'm dropping the bottom ones off it. And so that, in this case, this is leaving the top 10. So with drop or take, you sort of figure out which one makes the most sense. So let's look at the new function called CHOOSEROWS. It allows you to extract a row or rows out of a spill range. So this is that same formula that I had before that we looked at, the SUMIF. So this is a spill range. And what we want to do is I've got a drop down here, and I want to select a particular product to plot on the chart. There's a number of ways to do this. You could use an XLOOKUP, you could use an index match, but you can also use CHOOSEROWS. So what this is doing, it's referring to the spill range, which is in B2, and it's using a match function to figure out the number, because the CHOOSEROWS wants a number of the row to extract. So the match function is providing that. If I select that again, it should show me what the value is. There it is, 2. This is a new feature as well. When you select part of a formula, I'll do it again so it pops up again. It shows you the result. So 2, so gizmos are the second listed there. So again, if I change this to the widget, and we go there and I look at the match, then that should tell me 3 because it's the third one. That's a spill range too. So that automatically spills across and it's driving the chart there. If I delete that, I will get an NA error. So you might need to build in some error handling there because there is nothing, the match doesn't work. Okay, so that's CHOOSEROWS. There's also a CHOOSECOLUMNS function. So if you want to choose a column out of a spill range, you can use that. I'll finish off talking about new DAX functions. So DAX is DAX, and DAX functions are part of Power Pivot. They're also part of Microsoft's business intelligence package, Power BI. Power BI gets updated regularly, but Power Pivot hasn't been updated very often at all. So Excel's Power Pivot was updated with about 90 new DAX functions at the end of 2022. So there's been lots of updates to Excel over the past 3 or so years. You can stay up to date by checking out the Neale Blackwood website, where there's lots of Excel resources with companion videos. I hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching.